Dr. Alan Christianson, welcome to the DIY Detox Summit.
Hey, Bridget, glad to be here with you.
Yeah, so glad to have you. We're going to kind of mix it up with a little different type of topic today. We're kind of talking about like detoxing your liver to reset your metabolism. So you've
Yeah.
recently written a book called The Metabolism Reset Diet, and I know it has a personal meaning to you because you as a child were sickly and overweight and had to deal with that and had to find a solution for that, which you did, and you went on to become a doctor, an naturopathic physician. Tell us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, quite a journey. And, I'm glad with how things played out. But I wouldn't have wanted to redo a lot of it. I had seizures and complications from cerebral palsy, and I had chronic pain and wasn't very active. And I don't know, maybe it would have happened anyway, but somehow from all that, I gained a ton of weight and, turned to food for solace. And, yeah, and it was not anything I was all that aware of or self-conscious of. I was not, I don't know, not a very socially aware kid. And then around adolescence, the relevance of all of it hit home. And I took some hurtful comments along the way. And yeah, I used to spend time in the library reading books about like Carl Sagan had written or Isaac Asimov, space and science and stuff. And then one day I said, shoot, I'm going to go find health books. I've got to figure out some way to change this. So that was the basic mission.
You found like a dusty nutrition book in your school library or something like that.
It's a public library. The school library only had like kids books, but yeah. So
Gotcha.
there weren't many back then. It was different than it was now. And whatever there was just great to have some advice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know from the book that in some of those early days you started doing shakes that came from a family friend, MLM or something. And then this book actually includes shakes as well. So it's kind of interesting that it came full circle.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just talk about shakes for a second. It sounds like even after all this research you've done, you're still a fan of them, and tell us why.
It's a funny thing. And I hear people say, oh, I want to do just real foods. And I get that. It makes sense. But there's just so much evidence about benefits of shakes towards waste reduction. And, it seems that there's a couple of themes to it. One thing is just convenience. You can make them very quickly and very easily. But a big part of it is that there's this balance. So in the book, I talk about fuel as the combination of any mixture of carbs, fats, ketones, or even alcohol. They all work in the same way at a fundamental level. So the cool thing about shakes is that you can get protein to really keep muscle mass healthy and support the liver with very little fuel. And that's hard to do from just foods. Either you've got to have a lot of animal protein, which can have some drawbacks for just the pH load or oxalic or the uric acid load that it can cause, or you've got just far too much carbs or fats to have those ratios good. So those are a couple of big perks about that.
Okay, awesome. So let's back up a bit about how do you reset your metabolism? Because some people don't think that's possible. They say, well, I'm just big like my mama is big, or I have a low thyroid, so I can't, reset my metabolism. Maybe to say like, also I think the word metabolism just gets thrown around. Like if you're skinny, you must have a good metabolism, which I don't know if it's that simple. So yeah, maybe talk to what does actually metabolism mean and how actually can we reset it?
I think people often think about the metabolism as like the weight fairy, and you've got a good one or not. and yeah, it's not even how fast your body burns energy, because that doesn't change much apart from, you mentioned thyroid disease or per your body composition, how much muscle mass you've got. It's a rather static thing. So when I talk about it, I'm thinking about how your body turns fuel into energy and how well you can do that. So we never are consuming the exact amount of fuel that we need in the moment. So think about like a car, for example. If a car didn't have a gas tank, it would have to have a gas hose going to however far it went. It'd run out of fuel the instant it wasn't getting gas. So you've got a gas tank and you put that in your engine as you need it. And that's what your liver is. You fill your gas tank for the car every so often, and you consume food every so often. And by and large, the liver is the gas tank, and you pull energy out as your body's using it. So you're never exactly matching your energy need to your food intake. Your liver's always approximating that. And when it works well, you can be within 80, 90% of your target and do fine. You'll be at a healthy size, you'll have good steady energy level, and it's all good. But when those things don't sync up, your body is not able to really adjust energy needs to what your situation is.
Okay. Okay. And you talk about, speaking of cars and fuel tanks, you talk about the two kinds of fuel that our liver stores. And I thought this was really, really interesting. So can you explain those two types of fuel and how they can make us have a good metabolism or an off metabolism?
Yeah, and I'll do the simpler analogy first before it gets anything technical. So you want to keep yourself warm at night when you're out in the woods. So you make a campfire, and you use some big heavy logs for that. But you can't just, like, logs don't light themselves. You need to have matches and some kindling. You have some easier thing to ignite to get the heavy logs burning. So in this analogy, logs are triglycerides. They're a stored version of fat, and the kindling is glycogen. So glycogen only comes from carbs. Triglycerides are a fat, and they can be made from fat, but they can also be made from carbs or ketones or alcohol, most anything. When your liver's healthy, it's got some logs to give you slow, steady energy, but it also has some kindling to ignite those logs as you need it.
Okay. Okay. So what goes wrong in that scenario? That sounds fine.
It all sounds fine when it works well. Yeah. So what goes wrong is that we can take on more triglycerides than we can glycogen. So when there's some overload of fuel, the body keeps making more and more triglycerides. And at some point, they start oxidizing, they get chemically irritated, and we're losing our ability to store glycogen. So we get into the slippery slope in which now we've got all this wood laying around and no way to light it up anymore.
Okay, so ways we do that, ways we get off are, would you say, like overeating? I know, like, toxins are mentioned in the book. What are, like, the various ways that can get off?
Yeah, so, sure, in controlled situations, if someone were force-fed way more food than was comfortable for them, they would eventually have this happen. But when it happens at a population level, then the idea of, like, just gluttony or willpower makes no sense, and nor does genetics, because that doesn't change at a population level over the course of a few decades, and this all has. So we think about, over fuel, but also underutilization of fuel. And
Okay.
believe it or not, the population evidence shows that as a whole, people are more physically active than they ever were in the past.
Huh.
Yeah, more so than in the 50s, and probably equal to what we were in our ancestral past, believe it or not. There's not big differences that way. So we think at real fundamental chemical levels about the body not utilizing fuel as effectively. And there can be missing micronutrients, there can be issues with the bowel flora, too little short-chain fatty acids, and then we can have a lot of environmental toxicants that change how well the body can utilize its fuel.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about some of those points. Let's definitely start with the toxins, since we're on the toxin summit. Toxins can definitely affect metabolism in a lot of ways. Kind of your specialty is how they affect the liver. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so they change. The liver comes down to, when it's burning fuel, to its efficacy and repair rate of mitochondria. And the mitochondria's function is governed by endoplasmic reticulum, which are especially dense in liver tissue. So many toxicants make the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum, less able to properly regulate mitochondria. And the other effect they have is they alter how well the liver can manage stress hormones. So the adrenals make a lot more hormone and a lot of inactive hormone than the body needs. And the liver converts an inactive version like cortisol into an active form like cortisol. But when there's a burden of PCBs or bisphenol or lead, then that conversion becomes over-responsive. And the liver makes more stress hormone than we need for the situation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, right, it happens right in the liver. Okay.
The stress that we store, yeah.
Okay. Another thing you mentioned in a book is how common fatty liver syndrome or disease is. And can you talk a little bit more about that and why that happens?
Well, so the numbers we have are horribly incomplete, and they radically underestimate it, and there's no debate about that. And they themselves are shocking as they are. So we know that there's about 30 to 40% of adults that have this. However, in medicine, we talk about diseases you can rule in and diseases you can rule out. Like I'm looking outside of the desert right now, and if I saw a coyote, I could say I can rule in that there are definitely a coyote out in the Sonoran Desert. But not seeing any, I cannot logically rule out coyote. I
Gotcha.
just don't see them. And it's a lot like that with many conditions. So the only way you could say someone does not have fatty liver is by doing a biopsy. And you
Mm,
can imagine that's not a popular thing to do as a screen for healthy people.
no.
The one exception, the one case in which healthy people get liver, whenever someone gets a liver biopsy, it's because they're already suspected or known to have other liver problems. But yeah, the one exception is if someone wants to donate liver tissue to a loved one. So they have to go through a lot of easier tests first to make sure their liver seems okay. Make sure their body weight's reasonable, they're not diabetic, their blood liver enzymes are normal, their blood bilirubin's okay, their liver ultrasound's okay, everything non-invasive is ruled out. And if somewhere along the way those tests show a problem, then they're out of the running. But if they pass all of those steps, then the final thing, okay, let's make totally sure, let's do a liver biopsy, make sure you're good to go. So in those circumstances, when healthy people that have had their liver function just checked by every other way submit to liver biopsy, 38.5% are refused because they've got fatty liver syndrome.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it is really common. So that the fat builds up from this poor utilization of fuels, basically. And then does that in turn make the liver work less efficiently because it's got this fat in it?
Yeah,
Okay.
so think about the liver like a filter, like an oil filter, and the fat just clogs it up. Things can't flow through it as well. And they also create just more chemical free radical damage. So the liver can't work as effectively from that.
Okay. And so another thing you mentioned earlier were micronutrients to support the liver. I'm a big fan of this conversation. I don't think people know about the micronutrients to support the liver enough. And if we can, people can just leave with like a little more awareness of that and some, foods to incorporate, I'd be super thrilled. So I know you include some of those foods on your plan. Can you tell us about the micronutrients and some of your favorite foods?
For sure. So there's some micronutrients that everyone you can think of is relevant to your liver, but there's some that people just don't commonly run low in, and others that we do commonly run low in. So a
Okay.
couple of the big ones that can be commonly lacking or below optimal can include magnesium, selenium, zinc. They're huge. Magnesium, we see this in all the leafy greens, so they're great sources of that. The very densest sources per serving would be adzuki beans as far
Hmm.
as milligrams of magnesium. Yeah, they're super high in that. So beans, legumes are also really rich sources of magnesium, all types, but adzuki are at the very pinnacle top. Pumpkin seeds are great. Selenium's another good one. And selenium's in a big, big variety of foods. Funny thing is that beans, legumes, intact whole grains are full of tons of good minerals. And then one of the richest animal sources is going to be shellfish. So
Yeah.
um, oysters, clams, mussels, crazy high in those. Oysters are wonderful for all these minerals we're mentioning right now, especially selenium and ridiculously high in zinc. And yeah,
Okay.
zinc, we'll find that in several seeds and also a lot of types of shellfish as well.
So yeah, there's a lot of minerals you're describing here that we don't get enough of. And yeah, I think
Mhm.
some of the foods that their minerals are found in are, yeah, a little less commonly eaten now. What I do like, getting back to shakes, is like it's so easy to put pumpkin seeds in your shake.
Yeah,
I wonder what other foods do you like? Greens too. You mentioned what other foods
greens
do
are
you like to
great.
put in,
You
into
know, a
shakes?
big a big thing that happens with liver function is folic acid becomes an issue, and there's folates in our diet, which play a lot of roles. And a reasonable diet is pretty easy to get adequate amounts of folate, but the problem is that for many people, folic acid blocks the effect of folate. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are not folate deficient, but at a cellular level, they really are because their bodies can't do adequate methylation. So synthetic folic acid is added to a lot of processed foods. And for many people, even small amounts of that can completely block many of these important liver pathways.
Yeah. Okay. So we've kind of talked about some elements of this reset plan, the micronutrients, the fuel, and the plenty of protein. Maybe give us like the big picture. I know it's a 28-day plan. What would a day look like in the midst of this 28-day plan?
Pretty straightforward. What I encourage is making a giant shake for breakfast and holding on to half of that till later on for lunch.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Okay.
just drop dead simple. And we've got recipes for all those too. A good dinner. And I've also included some unlimited snacks. So you can make up, just vegetables by themselves, or there's dishes you can actually cook to where they're savory and tasty. So if you are struggling for something to munch on between those meals, you've got options that way. And then some quick micro workouts, 3 to 5 minutes to help keep the muscles engaged and activated, and lots of rest and lots of sleep.
Okay. Yeah, I know some people might think, oh, I couldn't just eat shakes 2 times a day, whatever. But it's only 28 days. It's obviously saving you a lot of cooking time because you're just making one giant shake, which is really nice. You get a month of rest. I think it's important to realize if something isn't working for you, there is a change required to get new results, right? And so if you feel like your waist is increasing and you've got stubborn weight you can't lose, you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, I think my liver is an issue. Why not try it? And you've got a book that's really easy to follow. It's only 28 days. And just do something new. You've gotten amazing results that you wrote about in the book. Tell us about some of the results.
It's been super exciting. And when I wrote the book, I talked about the clinical trials we've done, and they were incredible. We've also done a lot of challenges. So we've done 7-day challenges online. And I wanted people just to feel like, hey, no risk, no stress. They could try it out for free and see if within a week it was useful. And if so, they could do the 28 days. And from the 7 days, I've been blown away by how many similar results that we'll see. So one thing I would encourage listeners to be aware of is that to think about weight loss and waist loss as different things. If you're seeing a lot of weight loss, but not a lot of waist loss, you are not getting healthier. You may be getting unhealthier. So I'm excited when there's a lot of waist loss and not huge amounts of weight loss. In the 7 days, we're hearing left and right about people who have had 2-3 inches of waist loss and 5-7 pounds of weight loss. And that's uncanny, because most stats will say that each inch of the waist should be about 6 to 9 pounds of weight. And people are holding on to their muscle mass, but they're just shedding the midsections.
Okay. So, and it's the visceral fat that they're losing. Is that correct?
That's a lot of it. There's another layer too. So there's subcutaneous fat below the skin. There's visceral fat around the organs. The most toxic stuff of all is called organ fat. And that's within the organs, especially the liver and the pancreas. Oh. And it's that organ fat of the liver that's one of the biggest variables of waist circumference around the belly button.
Organ fat around the liver?
No, within the liver.
Within the liver.
Around, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Within the liver, the organ fat inside of it.
Okay. And I mean, I'm sure people, again, aren't biopsying the liver very often to see before and after, but it probably has been tested in some cases. Have you read about that?
Oh, for sure. And the easiest predictor of that is just height to waist ratio. So whenever someone's waist is more than half of their height, so easy math, if a person's 5 feet tall, that's 5 times 12, 60 inches. If their waist is more than 30 inches, the odds are really good that there's a whole lot of fat inside their livers.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, Dr. Christianson, you definitely inspired us to clean up our livers. I love it. Where was a main website where people can find you and then find all your resources, including your books and everything else you have to offer?
Yeah, Dr. Christianson, ChristianSon.com. If you spell it wrong, you'll still get there. But yeah, drchristianson.com.
Yeah, all the Christiansons are spelled a little differently, I've
Many
noticed.
ways.
Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. Yeah, great to be with you, and great job for the event. I'm honored to be a part of it.
Likewise.